So past, present, future, perspective of EoR, take two. Again, second time around. To me, this is a bit of an open topic and literal. This is almost my career from the past, learning things from the past. What did I do in the present to help influence my perspective on projects? And then where do I think we're going and what should we be doing? They each have an impact on each one. Every single one of the projects we've worked on in our past influences what we think where the future is going. So this is a bit of a knitted presentation together. But it's where are we going? Where's our industry changing? How do we advance, progress, and change that manage risk environment that drives our stable, socially responsible structures? I like to think that some of that change has been driven by operations. If you've been in operations, you know how forceful they can be. Definitely by cost. Nature drives a lot of it, and a lot of our challenges in the future are more due to nature. And then some has just been driven by our own inherent interest in learning and pushing our fields. As engineers, that's what we find out. So before I move on, Vicki Jones was here tonight. It helped me a lot with the upgrade in this presentation. So any of the good stuff, we can just listen. She went and found some good quotes for me. So study the past if you would define the future. We're not makers of history or made by history. So let's take a nod to history. So this is Pond Tar Island Dike in 1968. This I like to call the dike first. If you read through the list, it truly was for oil sands one of the first. It was the first to be built, first to discover MFT, first to discover issues when you translate from scaling and research to industry. We experienced scheduling pressures of limited to no deposition space available. Has anyone seen that before? They first was increased with overburden and with modified upstream construction, so hydraulic replacement sand. It was the first to experience your flow or static liquefaction from fast overburden. We were the first to have instrumentation monitoring on it, and the first one to be working on it. When we look at the other real big aspects that Pond One role over my phone for me was the approvals were originally by the Board of Health. Then EoR and all of its differences did not exist at that point, but it was I found that one very interesting. Marty can talk about this one for us. First dam safety review undertaken in Pond One in 1977. This is like the precursor for our dam safety reviews that we do. This is where it started, is on this pond. And we had our first geotechnical review board in 1994. Of interest on that first, we did not win the first geotechnical review board. Simcoe did, where they started the geotechnical review board in 1972. Yeah. And they had 13 members, of which Nordy was one as well. And Tony told me you were the young one at that point. So the review board has been a good practice in the oil sands for a long time. But when I look at the past, what I actually find the most interesting is when I was doing the 50 years of learning paper with Ed McRoberts. You ever get a chance to write a paper with Ed? Do it, he's awesome. But MFT, like I said, it was the first time to find it. Yet in the oil sands, 40 years later, we were writing this paper, MFT was almost a surprise. Hadn't been solved, we were still dealing with the issues of it, the volume, the need for initial ponds. So we keep relearning our lessons, and that's what we need to take from the past, to stop relearning things and learning things. I'll preface, I have a bad hand right now, so it's not going to be smooth changing pages. Okay, so we're going to move on to the present. So these are pivotal projects that influenced my perspective. Again, a couple quotes that Vicki got for me. Is the only real mistake we make is the one we virtually learn nothing. I'd argue that's not quite true, but the premise of it is if you can't learn from it, it truly is a mistake. And experience is the name we give our mistakes. As everyone says, we learn more from our failures than we do our successes. But in this industry, we need to learn from our successes, not just failures. We need to learn from them too, but let's not break them ourselves. So when I started Suncor Sand Dumping, it was a concept. We were looking to start construction, and it was going to be a massive structure. It was 140 meters in design. I love the top figure. That was one of the, another engineering cross section, but one of the construction guys had this little note that's put, "You are here." When I gave this presentation in 2022, we were now here. The structure was done. It took about 14 years to build. We were under construction and sand started placement in 2012. It's 140 meters high, 50 to 70 meters above ground. What we did on this project is we learned how to push limits safely. We put controls in place to manage those changes. We made design assumptions and we checked those design assumptions. We didn't just walk away from them. We went back and checked on them to make sure they were correct, to validate our design. In the past, we'd had IFCs for the sand, but it was for the whole structure. When you have 140 meters of sand, that's one drawing that's a little too much for not enough. And so we put in IFC drawings for every lift of sand. And then we put them in for 5 meters. The funny little story on that one, I always tell people, is I actually might be the person who got stuck on sand and most and have never driven on that structure. But I seem to have a bad luck where we got stuck. So again, we pushed our limits safely, but we tested every design aspect we had. We didn't just cross our fingers and hope for the best. We were out there testing it. And as you can see in the next pictures, the one on your left shows how many CPTs we put in that sand for that point at May 2021. When I left that structure and I left the group, I think we're at over 1,000 CPTs in that structure. Anyone have some familiar number now? We're probably pushing 1,500, about 2,000 at this point. And on the right-hand side, that was our GPS we used to tell us if we had any bad areas we wanted to test. So it gave us an informed decision on what to test. So any of the big areas, we usually pop the CPT in there to see how that is. What was actually interesting when I was on that structure, as I say, my aha moment, I was standing at the northeast corner of the structure, and that natural ground was approximately 350 elevation. And I was looking down at construction, and it was 300 meters at that time, and we were going up to 405. So basically, I picked the perfect day to show up, because about as much as I was looking down, I was going to need to look up on this structure. And that scared me. It was incredible. Like 50 meters vertical elevation, you don't appreciate. I think of all my drives to Saskatchewan for Christmas, and all the power poles are 100 meters apart, and they are, because I tested, because what else do you have to do in the road? And 100 meters when you're driving is like, whatever. But when you stood there and looked at 50 meters, it's huge. Scale. Scale is something we lose when we sit in the office. And we need to go out in the field and understand the depth of this and the impact of scale, because that actually is consequence. If we don't understand scale, we don't understand consequence. And it's a very important aspect on any job you're on or out in the field. Plus, it's fun. And then the IFC survey left. And then the one thing I remember having a conversation after I was leaving Sand Dumping with some of the newer EoRs who are following, and this would be true for anyone who's taking over a job for someone else, there's always room for improvements. Like we made some really big steps, I'd like to think, on Sand Dumping, but it doesn't mean we're done. It means the next person has to take this and go the next step forward and the next step forward. This is always a continuous improvement, and we can always improve on our past work. How many people remember the 2016 forest fires at Fort McMurray? Yeah, that's definitely an impact. So on the left, there's a lot of stats in there that are interesting to read. A couple of them that I love is the more than 80,000 people safely evacuated. But nothing to do with me and everything to do with every emergency response, but it's such a fantastic number. And when you hear the stories of people who were working up there and what they went through to get out and everybody got out safely, that's just an incredible success in my mind. But that fire started on May 1st, and on May 3rd, they had an evacuation notice. That's how fast this moved. It was moving at 30 to 40 meters per minute. On July 4th, they had 2,161 firefighters, 80 helicopters, 228 pieces of heavy equipment fighting this fire. It is still one of the top 10 natural disasters in Canadian history for costing. We checked. Vicky did. So why does this influence us so much? As geotechnical engineers who were located in Calgary as the engineer of record, once everybody was safely evacuated, where did geoteknics go to? How do we manage our structures? Yes, we kicked it old school. There are a lot of different ways we put into place, and the operations were on site, and it happened the operations were not actually operating. So it was a lot easier when you weren't adding water and sand to the structure. You still had to manage these structures, you still had to know what was going on. So that really defined how do you manage risk remotely with very few staff on site who are knowledgeable in geotechnical engineering. And if everyone always knows that necessity is the mother of invention, well, Suncor started going heavily into digital transformation at this point. We took our 2000 instruments, and within about 3 years, we were probably 80 to 90% of our vibrating wires were automated. Our sloping clinometers were only about 25 to 30%, but we had eyes. And I hate to admit this, when we were talking about how do you manage remotely, pandemics were an issue. It was one of the questions, how would you manage a pandemic? You manage through a forest fire, how would you manage through a pandemic when your staff is not on site or what have you to do it? So sadly, we forecasted the pandemic. The other thing that we really learned on that one too is more eyes are better. They don't have to be perfectly educated eyes, they just have to be eyes who see something every day. And then when they see a change, they can actually go, why is that changed? They don't have to know why it changed, but they can go, it changed. And they can engage the engineers at that point too. So a lot of different people you can get helping with you on those structures. So this is my really fun one. And this is where, staying in business, decisions make life better for geotechs. I don't recommend making these decisions, but they really were fun. This was a really excellent project to be part of. And as I tell operations, if I'm having fun, you usually aren't. I had a lot of fun here. So what happened here is we did a removal of a pond. Pond 8A was existing, it was mostly built, but it started moving when they were building Pond 8B, and we had to stabilize it. So Pond 8B actually became a stabilizing force of Pond 8A. But Pond 8B is on top of the EoR, so we had to remove it to get at the EoR. How do you do that? There's a lot of work that went in to figure out how we could remove that safely. What was also interesting is in the northeast corner of Pond 8A, we did a field scale trial for removing that sand. And if operations tell you they can't work around an instrument safely, I have photographic evidence they can. So you can tell them they can do it. So what really happened here is, again, we like to push the limits where we like to push them safely. This was a 1,500-page report that went to EoR, and because of the way we managed it with the Alberta Energy Regulator, we had a meeting with them. We had 4 hours of technical discussions on this. We had 0 secondary information responses or requests we didn't respond. And this one's gratuitous for you, because you never would have heard this story. On Pond 8A, or 8B, pardon me, we were in the design stages, and the working board had many questions because this had not been done in the oil sands. It was quite, the mine was really moving in behind us. So we had equipment, we had operators, we had everything to be concerned with, and a pond to stay safe. And we were at this one technical meeting. It was just on Pond 8B for 4 hours, and Nordy was there, and we were sitting in that meeting, and we were explaining everything. And he's asking so many questions, and we're all sitting there going, "Oh, we're never getting this through. We're not going to get it right." And then all of a sudden we went, "Oh, we never explained the timing on this project." So then we explained the timing on it, and that the mine wasn't right at the foot of Pond 8A, right at the beginning. We had to move in there. There's going to be probably 5-6 years. And then all of a sudden you see, "Oh, okay." And then he leans back, and all of a sudden it was like such an easy meeting. But before that, it was the worst thing ever. But because of those meetings and because of the work we had to do in order to satisfy ourselves and our review board, that's what made the EoR, work with us on this and understand it. Because we had done the work, there were no questions left to ask. We had answered them. So that's a very important project. And it also is really good at understanding the underlying histories. Oh, Opta. This is my fun, you know, Kermit the Frog, it's not easy being green. It's not easy being in EoR at times. If you are one, you know this. This was mine, not so easy being in EoR at times. And I think most of us will experience similar opta in our time, maybe not the extent of it, but the actuality of you taking over structure from somebody else, where you had no knowledge of it before. You come in one day and all of a sudden you're now the new EoR or something, and you have to figure out the EoR, you have to figure out the structure, you have to figure out everything that went on in the past and what's going to go on in the future. This one was tough, but it's truly, I didn't create any of it, nor did someone before me or the person before that, but we all own it. You own it. Once you take over EoR structure, you own that structure, you own everything that went before you. You need to make it right, you need to understand it. You don't get to say I wasn't part of it. That's just not what an EoR gets to do, sadly. And for EoR on Okta, what I learned is like all you can do is like identify and prioritize and knock them off. There's absolutely nothing more you can do. You just got to work the problem. So for me, what came out of this one was how strong a proponent for Tanys is required of leaders. You need a knowledgeable client. It sure helps the problems. BGC came in at the same time I did on that project. And I think Angela would agree with me that having a good knowledgeable client helped her get the problems through, helped her get, not being worried about getting the money and getting the project advanced. This is another my funny anecdote. I don't know if anyone else found this funny, but when Mac did their guidelines in 2018, and they put in that requirement, the training of all staff, and it listed all the types of different people you need to train, and one was supply chain. And I remember, oh my God, that's ridiculous. Why do I need to educate our supply chain staff on this? Well, Okta proved you needed to. We had a drain design and supply chain, no malice intent. They, with another engineer, decided that this type of pipe would work for the drain, and it didn't. So then we had to go back. So that is why you need to educate everybody. And so they were right. Mac was like on the leading edge of my mind. And you need to educate everybody who could touch this project in any way they possibly could, because they can influence it in ways you possibly can't think of until too late. This is my non-gratuitous learning slide. I've always loved the strong industry analogy that Lori has on the three-legged stool. And what I love about this is that most of this presentation I've given, I've used the word I a lot. And at one point in this presentation and all the work is it only been me. It has been a lot of really good people from regulators working with us, consultants, the review board, and other people on the owner side with me, including all of the operations, planners, leaders, everybody. It truly is what makes a strong industry is it's a team sport, and everybody needs to contribute. But we all need to remember, because I know a lot of people like the regulators like, oh, they're just out to get me. They're actually not. We all have the exact same goal, and it is a safe, down operation. That's it. We have different roles to play, and those are important different roles because those are different perspectives, which add more robustness to our industry and helps to add to that really safe down operation. Okay, the fun. So when I first looked at the Suncor, I remember the lawyers were like, well, you can't just say the future, you have to qualify it because what happens if it doesn't come to fruition? Oh my God, love lawyers. So this one from LIK is like the best way to predict the future is to invent it. So times out, everybody. These are my opinions. You guys get to do what you want with them too. So how do we keep the industry strong? How do we maintain the momentum we're on? How do we shape a more stable and socially responsible risk-informed future? So for me, it just relies on clear accountability, strong governance, and commitment to innovation. And as you can see, I'm relying on the three-legged stools to support all of these future advancements for us. Okay, so I had fun. I love the Swiss cheese analogy, except I reverse it. We always use the Swiss cheese to show you how failures happen. And it's like all these like odd events that line up to make all the holes line in and work towards a failure. I actually think this is reverse for dam safety, and that we actually have to line up those circles, but the circles are what we do right. So we have to line up everything right in order to not have a failure. So what does it mean to actually maintain it? It is the list of robust engineering, thoughtful governance, continuous training and education, high quality construction, vigilant monitoring. I like to think that the best engineering design can't overcome bad construction practices. And the best regulatory framework can't overcome governance. You have to have strong teams in the industries of the regulators, consultants, review boards, and owners. And we all must be accountable and committed to operational excellence. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And this is what makes the industry strong. The next classic picture of the iceberg. That's why do I think accountability, governance, innovation, and are the important aspects of it, and risk. Put it in risk in one word. That is what we do. We manage risk. So how do we best manage risk? And I think it's the accountability, governance, and innovation. These are what keep the catastrophic events from happening. If I go in a bit deeper on that, accountability may not have many words there, but I've put lots here. It's a favorite word of mine. I think to me, it needs more emphasis. And most people think, oh, accountability is just under governance. But I actually think accountability is so important that it needs to be outside of governance. And that's because we need to understand it and we need to accept it. I think it is culture driven. It's also personal driven. Each one of us have our own accountabilities, but culturally it helps you with your own. And if you look at this in the culture driven atmosphere, most of us have had to deal with cost drivers and where they want to just reduce costs. But for us, it's about safety and risk, and we have to maintain that at all times. I think the new systems have emphasized a lot more of accountability than they have in the past. So I think that's a great move. It's putting accountability where it's deserved, and it moves up through the change, not just EoR, because it can't just be a person. But I also think that without the accountability, governance is just a bunch of documents that sit on the shelf. And then governance. I know a lot of people think it can be daunting. It can be a lot of documents. It can be a lot to read. It can be a lot to understand. It can be a lot to apply. But it actually really is a good approach, and it's systems that build on learnings and the experience of our industry and other industries for leading practices. And that's where we get to learn from others, which is important. I think it's collaborative and divergent. And I know most people think collaborative means we agree. I checked up the definition, it doesn't. It actually means that we just have collaboration of two people or groups that are trying to get to a solution, working together. So it does fit. We can be divergent while being collaborative. We need to number the pages. So I think by having divergent thinking, we get to better decisions, we raise issues and we discuss them. And that does require different opinions. And honestly, again, I like fun in my life. I have fun with discussions and debating and learning and evolving. To me, this is where the fun is. And what we need to have in our governance systems is to rely on the full history of the industry and not just the ones working in the site. So we need to learn from people before us, as well as people we're with, as well as people on other sites. It's not an individual sport game, it's a team sport. And then to innovation. How do we keep that history in a format that others can use and we can spend our time figuring out the next problem? We know we don't have enough geotechnical engineers, but how do we do more with what we have? And I really do think replacing data searches with computers, having that data at your fingertips can help us make decisions faster. So, in the governance, I think like back to the divergent thinking, and this is where the pie of knowledge really speaks to me. It demonstrates why we need people from different backgrounds at the table, because we don't always know what we don't know. So you need people who can cover it off and so you overlap each other and eventually you fill that pie with knowledge instead of gaps in knowledge. So that means it allows us to have these governance systems speaks to more than just our engineers. It speaks to the operators, it speaks to the leaders, it speaks to the public by allowing us all to cover up different aspects of the timeline. And some of the topics we cover on that are associated allow our tailings people to be more knowledgeable than have been not been part of this governance system and have that education. So it's about management systems and operations, team training and continuous education, risk management, communication. In my notes, I have 2 explanation points. I think communication is key, and data management. And what's interesting is our governance system is really based on the past with a view to how we want the future to be. We'll communicate our expectations, clarify roles, responsibilities, support critical information retention of teams, and prevent silos and encourages collaborations. It is a work in progress, and we should always be looking for how to improve this. Stagnation is not a word we use in our industry. And I'm going to throw a little bit out there that most people could be a little controversial on, but I think perfect isn't a word we should use in governance either. I think if we wait for perfection, we never put a system to use. And we need to put systems to use. So we are better off having it at 80%, start using it and view it as a work in progress and keep improving it with all of our learnings and different opinions of people who come in. This is our continuous improvement concept, which of course, if we were perfect, it's hard to believe we need improvement. That's why we always need to think there's somewhere we can improve on, we can learn, we can do something different. When I was at Fort Hills and it was still a site with partners on it, one of the partners would come and review our tailings management system. And I actually loved this review. For me, it was an opportunity to see what other people were doing, but it was also an opportunity for them to question what we were doing. And I always like to tell them, I don't have to agree with you, but I do actually want you to make me think, because it makes me assess what we're doing again to make sure it still fits with what's happening in the world. And anytime you get a chance to reassess is a value. So I personally think we always need to keep questioning what we think is right, and we always need to look for new ways to improve on it. So for governance with integrating closure, we need to start with the end in mind. I think we've started a bit more, and GISTM has driven us to this a bit more as well, where they're making us think about how we're doing closure in all stages. And what I like about it is not just do it once and put it on the shelf and never look at it again. You have to do it every few years and confirm that it is still valid and the costs are still there for you. Because I think we get blindsided by closure costs at all times. And one reason I think we get blindsided by closure costs is net present value. If you've ever worked on a site that uses net present value for closure, it is the worst thing you can ever do. I think we need to stop using that because it basically in 30 or 40 years, it takes the value of your closure and reduces it to zero in today's dollars, which doesn't help you make a decision because you could make a cheaper decision today that can influence your closure. And as I say, I might have just contradicted myself from Pond AB because I like the same business decisions that I get to have fun solving. So to me, we can still have a few of them, but recognize those costs do come and you will have to pay the piper at some point. So if you get it down to zero today and don't take account of them, it will hurt you later. Here's a bit of the history of the closure and reclamation that Suncor had. Pond 1 has been reclaimed. It has not been delicensed. Pond 1 is the top there. And it was 50 years in the making. So this is basically similar to what we're going to have in the future for us. A lot of our structures are hitting that 50-year mark and they're going to have to be closed. And if they aren't hitting it now, they will hit it in the future. But Pond 1 was accomplished by infilling with sand and removal of MFT. Pond 5 was a little more innovative. It's covered with a semi-anchored floating engineered cover with MFT consolidation reduced with vertical influence. You can see the coke on top of that. These are just gratuitous photos because I'm an engineer and we love photos. So we see pond 1 in 2002, and then in 2010 when we were doing some of the reclamation and what it looks like now. So that shows you that it really can turn into a beautiful structure. So if we look at closure through the innovation lens, like not only governance needs to be pushing us through landscape, but we need innovation to be too. We've made significant progress, but we're not done. We still have to answer questions of transfer of ownership, governance of site, maintenance, ownership, responsibilities, costs. And the technical challenges, like I said, aren't done. We need to keep moving on the reclamation, and we need smart people testing and pushing envelopes of what's possible. And of course, like everything in the dam safety, it needs to be collaborative and it needs to be multidisciplinary. Okay, my fun now. I love digital transformation. I like to take over the real estate logo of location. It's data, and integrate. I think data is the new asset, and we need to treat it as such. And it needs to be accessible. I don't know how many of you guys used to do density tests, and they get put on a piece of paper, get put in a box, and they get thrown in some surgery, never be seen of again. Even if you had an issue, you can never find it and prove that you did a density test anymore. I think when we digitized, all we did was remove the fire hazard. We don't have boxes of data, we have a folder of data on the computer. So, we've made it safe. You still can't find it. We need it to be accessible. So that means you need to find a format where you can actually find it 20 years from now. So when I look at data, so now I've preached on making it accessible, but how do you actually make it? How good is data on its own? There's not one of us here who's looked at a poor water pressure response and just threw off the handle. We went, oh, what changed? We always have to understand it in context. So how do we get that data to integrate and understand it in context? So that when you can get that, you can get comparisons, trends, fixes, and a deeper understanding. But then, when you look at all the data, everyone says we are what we measure. I'm not a big fan of that. And that's because I've seen it go wrong, where, yeah, they've measured tons of movement of soils, but they never measured tons of soil moved to the right location. And that's where it needs the integration, so that it's not just tons moved, it's tons moved to the right location. Again, I'm a big integrator. So how about, this is where my dream on data goes, is if you could take the geology of the face, you know where the shovel is, you know where the shovel dug, and put it into the truck. And now that truck moves over to your structure. And if you have your IXCs linked in there, and it's talking to the truck, it won't even let you deposit the wrong soil in that structure because of the geology has been passed by wrong. So how awesome would that be? You never have to deal with another load of soil in the wrong spot. I find that a dream. And I would like that dream to become a reality. So whoever here can fix it for me, I'm in. But even past this integration, how can we make it easier for us? Think about how the data can look in videos. We've all seen the power of the Brumadinho video and how actually quickly people saw what that meant. But that's actually what we do on a day-to-day basis, is we try to explain risk and what can happen to smart people. They just don't have our experience and our education. So now we have the ability to take our data and provide it in a video format to leaders understand the risk they're actually taking, as opposed to cross-section. I do love a good cross-section. The other one I always have for a comment, and it applies even better now, as I used to talk about when I was at Suncor, and I'd have to phone Sam Safari, who was our dam safety engineer, go to seepage, and did it ever happen here? Well, Sam's been gone for 10 years. I'm gone now. So how does anyone know what my brain had? So if you put this into a database where all the seepage was, and you can look at it in a geographic sense, you don't need one. You just remove the need for people. So you actually now created your historical integrated knowledge base, which provides power to any new EoR, and in my mind, any company who is buying a new or buying over, taking over a site, they can now understand the risks and liabilities and the history of that structure. And my joke on this one too is none of us are going to work as long as Nordy, so these structures are going to survive us. Although if we work as long, maybe we will too get the lifetime achievement. So I don't ever think that digital twins will replace people. I think it'll make our people more effective and quick with any kind of information. I like to say we're only limited by time and our imaginations at this point. Technology's out there and it's improving at such a fast pace. And if you think it's something we should be looking at, you should find someone who can look at it for you. Because it's not, 10 years is a big amount of time in the digital world. One line I love from Ed McRoberts' keynote speech at 2023 at the Tanys and MacGowan conference. He says, do not shy away from being skeptic. Read a lot, think even more, analyze last and least. But now we can do that with the data at fingertips because we're not spending our time looking for it. So if I finish off with accountability, Monday B picture is actually a good one because accountability is important, and as engineers, we do have accountability to the public and operations. This means as engineers, our solutions need to be done safely and with appropriate reviews. When we did this for the engineering for Pond AB, we did have high quality engineering. Again, we were trying to solve the problem 5 or 6 different ways to make sure we were right because we hadn't solved it before. So you look at it in many different ways. We had to do some look at our industry fundamentals, and we were fully supported, and I hate the word challenge, but we were questioned and make sure we were right by our independent technical review. And this is an accountability that we had to do this. Accountability is about responsibility and then having a good answer for why you have that. So I believe accountability has to be throughout the entire organization. And it's about empowering people to do the right thing with checks and balances. Nobody is their own God. We do need checks and balances, but we do need the authority and the accountability to take those actions. If you notice on the Swiss cheese, there was a gap in the previous one, and I left it that way so you guys were spot spacing on that, because engineers would notice weird things like that. And it was true. Because I put this other one in because I believe in technical assurance so much that it is one of the pieces of Swiss cheese we need to go through and line it correctly. They have a lot of areas where they can block us. And what is really critical on review boards is that open and transparent review board. The board is only as good as the information we give them. If you are not open and transparent, you're wasting their time, you're wasting your own time. Risk is based on that. So never be worried about what will be said back to you. It is all a learning, and it is a different way to approach things. And questions are good when you're dealing with risk. So please go into any type of review board with just an open brain. I got to use this line. I was at a party this summer, and a person used this line, and he goes, your mind is like a parachute, best operated when open. So go in with that open mind and just trying to learn and see what else is there. And if at the end there's no questions and doesn't change anything, fantastic. You did a good job. But it didn't mean you did a good job if you had some questions. You just need to take the review board for what it is. Somebody was helping you manage risk. And we all need help managing risk. That's just a little aside. So I love review boards. It was some of the best times in my life, although I remember having some of the worst times in my life on off. I felt like I was cramming for my finals again. But it was such a great conversation, and it just drove so much more learning for yourselves. But I've had a lot of people ask what kind of format you should do for review boards, and it is very personal. For me, a lot of boards would ask you to ask them questions, and I've always responded with, if I know enough to ask a question, I know enough to answer a question. I don't need you to answer that question. I need you to find what I didn't think of. Please, point out other things, of course. There's always things that I missed, or I did something wrong, or I had a wrong premise. There's so many options on that one. But I really need you looking for what I wasn't thinking about. And this is a question for people who have been part of review boards on that. Do you think you've done a risk review before you even get to a review board? I'll answer that for you. You have done a risk review. You actually make the agenda, you set what's going to be on there, and if you have a set amount of time, you do not have sufficient time to cover everything. So you made a risk call before you ever went to the review board. So So could you actually think about this differently? Could you use a different type of review board, not a senior review board, but a peer review board, external third-party review board, any kind of different ways where you're putting your information forward and allowing them to ask questions. And this can actually help because we all know plans affect geotechnical structures. But plans actually drive a cost, and so then that's why they take the risk, because they think the cost is now the risk doesn't come through. So if you can actually help any planning with the geotechnical risk, you'd actually improve the risk situation. So any different type of review before a review board should be put in place. And I'm just going to finish this one off on the open, transparent conversations are incredible in my mind. It allows for the debate, discussion, higher learning, and for all those involved. We equate learning and experience to failure, since this is truly how we learn. But if we're smart, we can learn from others' mistakes and successes. This is the whole learning from the past to invent the future. So, to me, I think we need to learn from the past. We push the envelope safely and thoughtfully and advance our understanding in the present. We're grounded in fundamentals of our industry, both technically and operationally. We need to imagine and reach for the future. Do not settle for meeting present industry standards. Regulations are the way to do things. Exceed them. Drive for improvement and innovation. And honestly, never forget to have fun when you're learning advanced innovation. Thank you.